was suggested that I make this video to read out this letter which I'd recently written. Of course, this is all more about this terrible scam we're being subjected to, and what I learned from some Facebook postings is that my home county's police force, Derbyshire Police, had actually started doing surveillance of hikers, and they had these drones going up into a place called the Peak District, which is like a picturesque area. It's a national park not far from where I live, about 30 miles away from here, which we do visit occasionally, not as much as we should. And so once I found out that what they were doing was they were actually using drones and they'd photograph people going out for a walk in the hills, and then they were publicly shaming these people and saying things like, these vehicles should not be here parked in the car park at a place called Kerbar Edge, which is a beauty spot, and you can see here going for a walk miles from home, and they put this on their Twitter feed. So I wrote to them as follows on the 28th of March. Dear Sir, Madam, please pass this letter on to senior staff. As someone who has done work with Derbyshire Police in the past 1995 to 1997, I was truly shocked to read this story, which was on this Spiked Online website. You can go and look at it on there. I'll just quickly show you that there. And you can see the headline, Britain is sliding into dystopia, which seems to be about right at the moment. And at first I believed that this story was disinformation, but clicking on the links I saw that it was true. And so there was a link to their Twitter feed. And I said to Derbyshire Police, I was shocked, not just because the surveillance of ordinary people doing nothing wrong, we'll get to that in a minute, and not only because Derbyshire Police attempted to shame these people on social media, but also because these drones should be in use in surveying properties elsewhere to protect shops or businesses that may be being broken into during an enforced shutdown, which of course what we've been subjected to over the last couple of weeks now. There is far more risk of criminal activity in such areas than there is from people out hiking, walking their dog during permitted period of exercise. Also remember, it is government guidance, not law. Let's be clear. A law against freedom of movement like this would, you should know, breach human rights and constitutional rights. Also, how do we know that the drone operators themselves were not quote-unquote spreading the virus? What makes their work in surveillance of the Peak District immune to this? Were they wearing hazmat suits? How do you guarantee they were CV-free themselves? I would guess that you can't. Hence the basis of this whole video is meaningless and a waste of public funds, because they can't guarantee that these officers weren't quote-unquote spreading the virus. Now it appears you have based this video and action on faulty information, because the UK government downgraded the corona equals crown virus on 19th of March, stating it has a low mortality rate, which I included the link to this information here on the government's own website, and they said that they downgraded this. It's no longer considered to be a high consequence of infectious disease, in case you hadn't come across that posting. And so I sent them that. Yet police state lockdown measures have been added, not removed. And why is no one aware of this? Why has no one seen that we now have got to a point which is very close to what other countries occupied by Nazi Germany and those in the former Soviet Union experienced between 1940 and 1989? So, do we now have to get a doctor's note or a vaccination certificate to go walking along Kerbar Edge? Do police want to validate these papers before allowing us to go about our leisure and business activities? Didn't our parents and grandparents fight in a world war to prevent this sort of activity by officials in oppressive regimes? Just what the heck has happened since January? We are now closer than ever to living in a system which is based on a kind of eco-health fascism, and this latest scenario which has been rolled out is a frightening illustration of this. All UK police forces must operate on full and truthful information. The truth in this case, if properly researched, and that this so-called virus is actually not much different from seasonal flu. And most healthy people are not really affected any differently, and even this has been stated and illustrated in the thoroughly corrupted UK press. The real and deadlier virus has been the spread by mainstream media reporting the normal death rate and attributing most or all of it to coronavirus. If you don't believe me, look for all the reports of deaths and find out how many didn't have other health problems. The terrible, awful lockdown measures have already done vastly more damage to Britain and its people than any so-called virus could ever have done. Of course, but as Boris Johnson has now tested positive for this deadly condition, we should just have to wait to see what effect it has. Will he become incapacitated? Will the Deputy Prime Minister take over? Will the virus kill Bojo? Or has he really just caught a cold and is having a laugh at all the people who have fallen for the scam? If you care about the future of our country, I implore you to start researching this whole matter rather than just uncritically and unquestioningly following a script handed down from on high by some group or groups that appear to have global pan-governmental influence or control. Why don't you, as an example, check into the history of the person, that is Tedros Adhanom, who declared the pandemic in the first place? You can check, for example, whether he has any kind of criminal record. That's what police are supposed to do, isn't it? I trust you will share this letter with other police forces and ensure our basic freedoms, including travel, free association, are maintained instead of being stomped out because too many people have been taken in by some dubious, unproven story about an alleged killer virus. And if the situation becomes worse and results in civil unrest or a breakdown of our society, the blame will be shared by any officials in positions of authority who can't or won't check facts and simply roll over and get with the programme rather than performing due diligence and checking whether a story being given to them with allegedly grave consequences is actually true or not. And then I signed it in disillusionment and exasperation. And then I said, please don't come and arrest me for critiquing and unpicking government narratives and propaganda. I don't even know if there is a law against this now. Maybe such a law was rushed through a three-quarters empty parliament at midnight during a fake and contrived crisis. And at the bottom of this page, which is on my website here, I'll put this link in the description for anyone that hasn't already seen it, we have the story of another fellow who was out walking his dog and he was fined by Derbyshire police. So make of that what you will. Now, not long after I'd written that letter and sent it, I received a report. I've kept the name back because he didn't want to be identified, but it's a chap living in Scotland, and he advised me of a similar thing where he wasn't walking his dog, but he was actually taking his parents out, or his father out, to a local coast road, and he was then accosted by two police officers. He tells this story. I won't read it all out here. You can read this on the website. Here's the URL. I'll put that in the description. And he was fined £30 for being outside without a reasonable excuse. So this is now classed as being antisocial behaviour. And he's in his 50s, this chap. And he lives in Edinburgh. So this was Scottish police that were involved. And he was told by the police that COVID-19 was killing thousands of people and it was very dangerous, which of course is a total lie. It's a total lie. And he tried to explain to them that this had been downgraded by the UK government, but the policeman, of course, didn't listen and continued to say that he should not be outside. And then they fined him, and he sent me a copy of the fine ticket here, which now puts him onto a database just for being outside. And of course, the thing that you have to remember is, if you look at down here, there were some pictures in the paper, and this is one of the police officers concerned. I don't think this is the chap who was involved, but it may very well be. But this was in the paper. And you can see here, these police are not wearing gloves, they're not wearing masks, they're not wearing any protective measures. And my question would be, why aren't these police at least telling people to protect themselves and prevent the spread, wear a mask or whatever these stupid measures are supposed to do? But no, they're not doing any of that. All they're doing is they're harassing people and then saying you have to pay this fine for being outside without permission because the government said so. So this is the state of affairs. This is a police state, having to have permission to go outside, to go about your everyday life, just because people have been convinced of this scare story. So that's another example of the police state being erected around us during the as an excuse to deal with this fake pandemic. The other thing which people have been asking me about are videos like this that have been circling on other issues, and has been mentioned quite a lot, is people are saying that these 5G installations are going up whilst everyone is in lockdown. Now, I don't deny that this is happening at all. I mean, there's quite a few videos, and there's quite a few people, filming these things like this. But I'm still, wondering about the 5G connection. I know that people like Dr. Tom Cowan, who's done some very useful videos on the coronavirus stuff and viruses in general, and explained a lot of stuff which I didn't know or understand. And he argues, and I think there's got to be some evidence that this is true, that 5G signalling can impact on human health, and it can cause problems for human health, and people are linking this to the coronavirus outbreak, and they're saying, for example, that Wuhan is a 5G hotspot, if you will. A lot of 5G installations there apparently, and it's one of these sort of techno-Chinese cities, etc. And Dr. Tom Cowan, as I say, he's talked about this and basically said that RF, radio frequency interference, can affect human cellular biology, and makes an argument that the 1918 Spanish flu outbreak was actually caused by installation of radio equipment at the time, which was alien to people back then. And similarly in the 1960s there was increased usage of radar equipment, and also in the Second World War, and this caused disease outbreak. So few people have asked me about the 5G connection. Now, people have got to understand that 5G is limited in installation. Yes, they may be increasing the rollout during the lockdown, using it as an opportunity to get things in more quickly, uninhibited, unseen, and so forth. I don't know, it's possible, but it's not going to be everywhere. It's not right across the countryside. And indeed, the problem with 5G equipment is that they need a lot of it because it's short range. And yes, it's true that some of the wavelengths they're using, the 26 gigahertz and the 40 gigahertz primarily in Britain and Europe, I think there may be other frequencies in different countries, I can't remember them all. Yes, it appears that if you are stood in the way of these things, they can be harmful. But some people are arguing that they can rotate these masts and fire these beams at people that they don't like, undesirables, based on tracking them with mobile phones or whatever. Is that true? Well, I doubt that. I can't prove that it's not true, but I don't think that they have such a facility to set up all these 5G masts, within a couple of months, and then program them so that they can track down and fire beams at undesirable people to give them brain hemorrhages or heart attacks or whatever other terrible thing. I don't think that's possible. And also, people should understand that 5G is a collection of technologies. Some of the frequencies that are being reused, and you can look this up, are actually frequencies that were in use in the early 1990s for the original GSM phone network in the sort of 800 megahertz range, which are now essentially been mostly replaced by the newer sort of 3G and 4G technologies, which were rolled out in the sort of late 90s, early 2000s, and this sort of thing. So not all 5G uses the harmful, or more likely harmful, radio frequencies. And yes, I've heard the scare stories about birds falling from the sky and stuff like this, and I'm not particularly happy with the idea of 5G, and it does appear to be linked to the smart grid, and thereby possibly used to track people and so forth. I think there's every possibility of that, but the actual health effects, I think, remains to be seen. I don't really think we need this 5G technology as badly as they're claiming. because the current networks seem to be fairly robust. So I'm not sure what their argument is for wanting this higher bandwidth technology, faster transfer, other than for all these sort of smart grid control Agenda 21 type applications. So yes, that's something to be aware of. How much of it is linked to coronavirus? I think that's far more difficult to say than some people are claiming. I don't think you can easily say that that's happening across all the world. Certainly in some of the centres like Wuhan, perhaps, but elsewhere where 5G isn't being installed and there are still these alleged cases, which actually are not real cases, they're just ordinary seasonal flu being reported as coronavirus. So make sure you try and keep these things separate and clearer in your mind as you can. So to finish off this video, I'd like to just go through a little short PowerPoint I've prepared, which is I've called How to Crash the Global Economy and Gain Financial Control of Almost Everything. And it's just a hypothesis that I had, and it's pretty rough and ready. I've just done it in an hour or so this afternoon, so it's just a few thoughts that I've had on this whole thing based on conversations I've had and things that I've seen. It's not meant to be a prediction of what will happen, so you can take it how you think. If you think it's a load of rubbish, fair enough. So what do? You pick a time in the winter season in the Northern Hemisphere, and what you do is you start a scare story about a deadly virus in a populated, industrially polluted Chinese city, for example, Wuhan. You hire some folks to put on masks, then faint or fall over in the streets. You make some videos of these stunts and circulate them on social media, so it looks like people are dropping dead from this virus. I mean, these videos might be made in Wuhan, they might be made in another Chinese city, they might be made anywhere in the Far East. You circulate a few stories about a weaponized virus for good measure, and instead of reporting that people are dying of a respiratory illness, you report that they are dying of a new type of flu, and you call this new type of flu COVID-19, coronavirus 19. Now, you can't call it bird flu or swine flu or SARS, as that's already been done. You've got to give it a cryptic sounding coded name to make it sound deadlier. So you get this COVID-19 term into the public consciousness. So what you do is with this virus, you pick a virus that most people have in their system already, and viruses are basically toxic residue from cells that have been poisoned, and so most people have this coronavirus or something very similar to this already in their system. A high proportion of people have it. Now, then what you do is you design what's called a polymerase chain reaction test, a PCR test, which, if you run this with enough cycles, will show that a high percentage of people can test positive with the virus. They actually have this virus, and your test will show this. So then what you do is, using the unreliable test on as many people as possible, as many you can get away with or get within a certain time frame, both those that are ill and those that have died, you get this test used on those people. Get all your media contacts to start reporting most or all deaths in this region, say Wuhan or wherever it is, attributed to the deadly, cryptically named COVID-19 virus. And then you ensure that the media keep reporting these awful deaths without reporting the normal death rate for this time of year, nor how the test has been created, nor the number of false positives that the test gives. So you don't tell them anything about the test, you don't tell them that it's not very reliable, you don't tell them what the test is. There's these different types of tests, and you don't tell them what type of test it is. You don't tell them anything, you just say that these people have got this virus and they died of it. Then what you do is, soon after that, you've done that maybe for a few days or a week or something, you get an unelected WHO official, a former communist leader of Ethiopia, actually. I've missed that out there on the PowerPoint, but never mind. And he has a PhD in community health studies rather than a medical degree. You get him to declare a pandemic caused by the outbreak of this cryptic COVID-19 virus. And then you get the controlled media in more and more countries to report the bogus test results for more and more people and get them to report more and more deaths, even though the deaths are mostly just as they would be at any other time in the winter. And then you repeat the previous step in 24/7 media coverage for about another 1 to 2 weeks. And of course these steps are vital to make the pandemic story fly. Once it seems like enough people are dying from a contagious disease and enough people believe this story, start prodding officials in governments and other bodies to say something must be done. And then you keep reporting high numbers of deaths without explaining this as the normal daily death rate, because typically you might get 1,600 or 2,000 deaths a day in any given country or region, but you just say that that's all down to coronavirus. So you link most or all of the normal deaths in a given region or country to the cryptic COVID-19 virus, and then you ensure that the notion that it is dangerous and contagious are kept in the forefront of people's minds. So you link this idea of a dangerous, contagious virus to the normal deaths. Again, make sure the COVID stories supplant and displace all other stories from the media, such as the ones about high-level paedophile activities, political scandals, Brexit, financial problems, anything really that you can get rid of all of those stories, largely, just by having this terrible virus that's going to kill everyone. So, step 5 then, now that you have enough people on board with a fake story and with fear and scaremongering, start limiting recreational travel between countries and enforce local quarantine measures to contain this deadly outbreak. Keep reporting increasing deaths from more bogus testing being done on more sickening people. So it's not more people are getting sick really. What you're doing is you're just increasing the number of people that are tested so that you can link these tests to these coronavirus figures. So that makes it then seem like the situation is getting worse. The governments will then look good when they pass stringent measures limiting people's movements in their hometowns and elsewhere to deal with this spread of disease. You then close the schools and the shops again to stop the disease spreading, and this forces a large number of people to give up work and lose their income if you do it for long enough. Then you start talking about a cure for the not deadly virus and therefore get people thinking that measures need to stay in place until the cure is ready. Get media reports to talk about setting up temporary hospitals for all the victims of the awful virus and show video of these being built or set up or what have you. Over a period of time, round up some homeless people and take them to these temporary hospitals. But at the same time, you must prevent the showing or circulation of any stories about the normal hospitals from not being full. So you've got to stop these stories about the ordinary hospitals just being basically the same, not being full, they're not overrun. You just want to focus on the stories of these temporary hospitals which you've set up somewhere, and got a few people in them somehow, homeless people or people that have been displaced from other accommodation maybe. By social services. You keep the scare stories going so that people don't ever get wind of the scam. Instead, they just think the draconian measures are protecting them from this terrible virus which is going to kill everyone. After a few more weeks or months, you've managed to collapse most of the global economies, so start to put in place emergency measures to restructure them. Form partnerships between massive global corporations, e.g. retail corporations and governments, to deal with the emergency in various ways, and then get governments to borrow lots of money from the banks or bankers or banksters so that they can give handouts to people who have been financially crushed by the fake pandemic. Additionally, you want to sell all the world's governments your useless virus tests and offer a fake toxic vaccine at a premium cost. Imagine selling 2 billion vaccine shots at $50 a shot and say 2 billion test kits at $20 per test kit. Something like that, just figures I took off the top of my head. Just imagine how much money that would add up to. Start a media campaign about the vaccination for the deadly disease. Say to those that want more handouts, they must have the vaccine. Additionally, pass new laws that allow freedom of movement only if they have taken the vaccination. To stop the future spread of this and similar deadly viruses, after all, it happened once, so it can happen again in the future, of course, implement a tracking system for all people so that authorities will know where everyone is and can fine them for travelling out without permission or without a health certificate or something similar. So, After that, step 9 then, congratulations, in only 2 or 3 years you've gained much control over all the world's governments, economies and people and left them in a broken state of fear, poverty and ignorance. And you've done it, you've achieved your new world order. A likely story, isn't it? A great yarn. But going back to the thing about the hospitals and so forth and what's been happening with these fake diagnoses and the false diagnosis and the exaggeration of the figures, I had 3 people contact me on the 1st of April, and it was not an April Fool's, by the way. And first it's Bob Story, and he says he didn't want to bother me with this information at first, but her brother's father-in-law had passed away, so this is it is a friend of a friend story. I know what you might think about this, but I received 3 of these. So this person, this father, brother's father-in-law, he died of sepsis and pneumonia, but she was told the body needed to be cremated as soon as possible to prevent further spreading of the disease. And he'd been ill for the past year and in and out of hospital in the West Midlands. This added further distress to Joanne. Now, later yesterday afternoon, I saw a friend who lives in the same village as me. He is a male nurse and he works in a large hospital. He was depressed and distraught. Normally, one can have a joke and laugh with him. He complained to me about the hysteria, his words, and lies about the coronavirus was causing. He was concerned about people's behaviour in response to this problem, and then began to gesticulate with his hands pertaining to the amount of people who die every week in normal circumstances. His hands were about a foot apart. He then pinched his finger and thumb together with a spacing of about 3 millimetres and said, "This is the amount dying from coronavirus. Very little." I recited the news I had earlier, read the death of my wife's sister-in-law's father, etc. He confirmed the figures were being lied about and normal deaths being added to the coronavirus statistics. He was also concerned about people's livelihoods being affected and businesses going bust. I have never known this friend of mine to be so distraught. He said he no longer watches TV or listens to the radio. Good for him. He prefers to be at work where the real sanity exists. When I was sure he was okay, I offered help to him if he needed someone to talk to, and we departed. I go shopping often at our local town, and going around the local supermarkets is like playing hopscotch as people move from one square to another that marks the 2-metre distancing space. They even hold their breaths if you need to pass. I feel saddened with the irrational behaviour being caused by the government lies which I've observed and agreed with my friend's concerns. And so that's from Bob. And even just while I was actually making this video, I received another email from Reese, and he says a bit about hospitals. We've communicated in the past couple of times. I just rented an Airbnb in Little Rock, Arkansas with another person like myself who endlessly questions every bit of this. This was on Pine Street, and we were right across the street from a hospital, UAMS, or was it UMS? At any rate, we talked the last few days several times about how dead it seemed. Now, admittedly, I didn't go inside and we didn't see in the emergency room, but still, it looked dead. I think there should be a call to your audience to take pictures of hospital parking lots around the US and the GB. So, whether you want to do that, it's up to you. I know that a few people have been doing this already, and they've posted YouTube videos, and I'm not convinced, again, by the stories of this deadly pandemic. It just doesn't, the evidence is not there. And then I've got another 2 here. A very short one from Kim. I work as a cleaner at a school near me, and the agency worker that I'm with says that her friend at Kettering NHS is still the same, no queues, nothing. And of course this links to some of the other videos that you can see that where people have gone up to these hospitals and trying to film them, one in New York, one in Berlin, which I've posted in recent updates on Check the Evidence. So then I've got a story from Hillary, also came in on the 1st of April. She's thanked me for putting out some of the information. And she said she'd just come off the phone with her friend, and I'm quite astounded, Hillary says. Her friend works at a psychiatric hospital in Leeds called The Mount. It has over 100 patients, all elderly as far as she knew. There is also a mother and baby unit, but I'm unsure of the situation of that, as she just works in the psychiatric unit. She told me that they were making an isolation ward, so I quickly asked, how many patients do you have with COVID-19? She replied, none. I asked why the need for an isolation ward, and she said they don't want to get caught out. I also asked her, seeing that she is a nurse in a Leeds hospital, if she knew anyone with COVID-19. She said no, which I found very strange. I don't know anyone with it. My kids don't know anyone with it. My friends don't either. It all doesn't quite add up. So there you are. 3 stories. Yes, you can criticise me for saying that they're friends of friends and this sort of thing, but it is pertinent and relevant to what I'm presenting here, and there are many of these stories now coming out, and even certain officials are objecting to some of the measures now. So there you are. Okay, so that's really all I wanted to say in this video. I hope that's given you some food for thought, etc. And let's see where this goes. Still not looking brilliant, but I hope with all the information that's coming out, we're going to be able to stop this scenario unfolding in the way that whoever started it wants.